And we're back for part 2 on marketing and competitive advantage. Let's jump back in. You are a businessman. You understand marketing, upselling, cross-selling. You understand the value of having different, pillars in your business that feed into each other. We've also seen you build a successful speaking career, public speaking career, and advisory firm as a coach, talking about marketing, talking about that marketing stack, inbound marketing content. And what's interesting to me is you cannot cross-sell into any of those things. You do not offer copywriting services. You never have. You don't offer video podcast services. You don't offer, creating templates. For me, I think it's interesting that you've picked this passion topic, which is your passion topic, and you like watching businesses sell, but you yourself in your own businesses have not developed other branches to profit from executing that. So is this a blind spot of yours as the businessman? I find it interesting that is it altruism that you're giving back?
So, oh man, I get caught out, hoisted on my own petard. I think the answer to that is it could be a blind spot. Okay, it could be like lack of interest. Okay, like lack of personal interest. It could be a desire for focus, on some other specific things. So, for example, am I personally interested in selling, say, editorial services, writing, etc. Am I interested in selling social media management services? Am I interested in selling graphic design services and everything? Well, in some of my last businesses, we did some of that stuff. And, it was an adjunct to sort of the core strategy work that I did. And so, I don't know, maybe we'll think that, maybe Rania will start thinking about, well, gee, are these additional service areas of the Brain Trust Professional Institute, done for you? Yeah, it's a possibility, honestly, but it's not core. So here we are, we're a tight boutique of expertise. Do we want to spend our time managing those functions, or do we want to drill deeper into what makes us unique, right? And so there's lots of people who can do those things, but having those, does that make us more? Does that give us a sustainable competitive advantage? And the answer is no. It may be just a bit of a margin enhancement, if you will. But it also takes away time from our core, so maybe that's something we should consider. But right now, we love doing the work we do for our current clients, and they often have their favorite writers, their favorite social media, their favorite something else as well. But interesting idea.
I'm not here to renegotiate our business model on the podcast here, Randall, but I want to circle back to outsourcing in a minute. But Randall, as author, you've written 8 books. You are fastidious and proud of your weekly tip sheet that you've had for many, many, many years. You enjoy the creative process, but not everyone is like that. Not every leader thinks that way. And like you said, is it their interest to do so? So while you do, recommend to all leaders and people that want their own brand and corporate brand to invest in that way, for people who don't like to write, who don't like to be on video, who don't like to speak, do you have recommendations for alternate ways that trust curve could look like for their inbound marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. So several things. Number one, you don't have to do everything yourself. So you're a small group of partners in your firm. Okay, one person might prefer this, somebody else might prefer that. Okay, so you don't have to do everything yourself. You could distribute it. Number two, if you're a solo, if you're super small, if you've just got one person who's typically the public face, etc., you could delegate that. And when I say delegate that, it means this. It means, for example, spending a little bit of time with a writer editor type or marketing type, and having them pull out from you a whole bunch of those unique insights that you might actually have. And then actually having somebody else for example, develop those, right? It might be somebody else in the organization, or maybe somebody that's outsourced. I don't really think ChatGPT is the kind of place to do it because, where's your original, thought leadership, if you will. So there's that part. Okay. The other part is, not everybody, correct, likes to write or feels comfortable, for example, doing a webinar or doing video or speaking, etc. But there could be some place for you in media, right? Doing an op-ed, or, for example, being somebody who's interviewed, okay, by journalists, for example. You could be involved on boards, for example, not-for-profit boards where you get the chance to press the flesh and build one-on-one relationships with other people who are people of influence, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff. Our course, Thought Leadership to Grow Your Business, speaks to, I don't know, around 50 different ways that people can actually do that separate from just writing. We do think the ideation part is something, if you're hoping to be a thought leader, is something that you can't delegate. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff there that you can. Literally, dozens and dozens of very specific ideas and exercises in that course, precisely for this.
Randall, I like your answer, which is, do what your heart desires, play to your strengths. There's lots of choices, but at any job, there are parts of the job we don't like, and it comes part and parcel. And as leader, this is the case as well. Would you not recommend to someone, like, and I've seen you do it, like, stretch a little, practice till it feels better. Like, you'd really say to one partner, leave the IP and leave the thought leadership and writing to your partners. You wouldn't say to them, you're going to get left in the dust.
So if they're partners, I remember when I worked at KPMG years ago, what was interesting is that one partner was in charge of professional practice and compliance. Another partner was in charge of IT. Another partner was in charge of very much a business development oriented. Somebody else was in charge of doing, audits or consulting, a specific type of consulting engagement. Somebody else was responsible for, so the idea of when you've got a broader senior leadership team, you can divide and conquer. And it's not a question of somebody being left in the dust, etc. Really more, it's a question of saying, okay, how do we make sure that we play on each individual senior person's strengths? And by the way, it's not just senior persons, it's everybody in the organization, right? So if you take a look at the smallest micro companies, everybody does everything. Most organizations don't have people that can do almost everything, right? Or enjoy doing everything. A lot of people prefer focus. But the concept of, do we play to an individual's strengths or do we play to an individual's weaknesses? I think getting the most out of your people, and certainly true in marketing, is to make sure that you're able to play to people's strengths. So having somebody, for example, who truly is not a good speaker, just as an example, and say, well, you've got to speak, otherwise you'll be left in the dust. I think that it behooves us to say, okay, what are that particular person's strengths? Certainly from a marketing and business development perspective, but in terms of the entire needs of the organizations, how do we play to that person's unique strengths and get the best out of them? And if it turns out in their particular case, it's not the thought leadership and the inbound marketing, maybe they're excellent at becoming the trusted advisor. And more than anybody else, that's what they're best at. Right. And so, I don't think it's a do or don't. I also think that it's not binary, right? It could very well be that, somebody can do something, they know they should do something, and to your words, they should be pushed to stretch a bit. Because sometimes people become just comfortable, right? I think that's a little bit where coaching comes in, and I've certainly seen with some of my coaching clients, so some great movement just because they hadn't thought of doing something before. They tried it, they built some skills, and all of a sudden, it's something that not only are they good at, but they enjoy it. It's just that they hadn't done that before. They hadn't been coached through it. So
back to outsourcing. Part of the IP that we can offer our clients is access to all of our checklists and RFP templates, and of course the lessons learned. For clients, people out there who don't have the internal capacity to create all their, their funnel of thought leadership and their inbound marketing. Talk to me about that outsourcing process and what due diligence recommendations you would recommend, because we've seen clients and peers taken for a ride hiring, flashy, fancy companies, and the results are not nice, not good.
Yeah, I'm thinking of one particular one, which I don't want to tell the story because um, they're probably listening to the podcast. Um, but there's a lot of flashy salespeople who say, you know something, we can do the fill in the blank, um, the website, we can do the podcast, we can do such and such for you. Just, and so the question of due diligence is several different levels. Obviously, do you like the work that they do already? Right? Number one. Number two, do they truly understand exactly what your business is, and more particularly what your objectives of doing that particular outsourced task? It's just not arms and legs, okay? Number three, sometimes people, when you outsource, are best at implementation, others are best at strategy and planning, etc. So where actually is their particular sweet spot? I think it's also a question. Yeah, of course, speak to some references and everything, but sometimes you don't know the questions to ask, right? And if you've gotten a trusted advisor, okay, who can actually say, okay, if you're going to outsource to so and so, ask the question about so and so. And gee, when you structure that particular thing, here's some factors to consider, et cetera, because at least that way you can have a decent conversation with the organization you're outsourcing to. I think there's also a procurement angle to it. One of the things certainly when we were doing all the, when we used to, accept those kinds of engagements, can you help us do a fill in the blank? We would sometimes get an RFP that is so long, and it was sent to so many people. We think, hey, it's just not worth actually doing it. Okay, we're going to pass. Okay, and it's not like we weren't interested in the business. It's just the investment required to answer this RFP was just absolutely huge. And when you ask, they're sending it to dozens of people. So the probability of you actually winning or them spending the appropriate time, doing their due diligence on you is like so little. The juice is not worth the squeeze. So you just say no. So as a result of that, the people who are left actually, doing it, either they pop their fees so high, just to account for the fact that only such a percentage of those RFPs that they'll actually win, or they're the B team or the C team and not the A team. So I think procurement is a net blocker sometimes of getting the right particular partner out, and I also say, whether you're a larger organization with more sophisticated procurement or whether you're a smaller organization where you do things less informally, I think sometimes the concept of an open-ended RFP where you ask them to fill in the blanks themselves is actually a lot more powerful. And here's what I mean. If I said, and let's just take a simple example of you want to do digital strategy. Okay, and an RFP that said, here's our 30 requirements to do, to a digital strategy. Here's the 30 things that we need. Well, everybody's going to answer, here's how we can do those 30 things. Exactly. But you have no idea when you get those responses as to who actually understands it at a very deep, visceral level and who basically isn't. So instead of doing that very, very prescriptive kind of RFP, you would say, we're looking to do a digital strategy and then give a very, very high end thing, grow the organization, improve engagement, whatever it is. Okay. Describe your methodology to achieve that and discuss any factors that you think are relevant. So all of a sudden, everybody's going to respond based on where they're coming from. And you're able to see from the RFP responses, okay, these ones look like they're like a technology house because their answers and their proposal is very technically. This one over here is like obviously designer, graphic design. It's a very different angle. This one over here, it seems to be really very strategy, and they've got a methodology for that. But gee, they don't do this. They don't do the technology or the design. right? But so you now can actually say, okay, what do we need based on those responses, right? So there's a a huge amount of due diligence. One of the things, interestingly, a lot of our clients say, hey, something, we need some of your time. Can you sort of sit with us and sort of coach us through finding that outsourced vendor? Okay, we've got our process, etc. We just need to borrow the brain cells, the brain trust brain cells, to sort of help out in that particular way. And that's fine. We're not bidding on it. We our allegiance, if you will, is to the client, right? And so if you don't have the internal brain cells, or if you think that an external perspective might de-risk the process, improve the outcomes, that's also another way.
We've mentioned your trust curve framework a few times. We can, quickly summarize it here if you'd like to do that. But I'd like to ask, in your trust curve framework, where you cleverly define the buying process for buyers into awareness, preference, trial, and commitment, to my mind, obviously commitment is the most important one, but the really key element here to hook them is the preference level. Okay, so do you think people are different and they prefer different brands for whatever, either superficial or psychological or socio, whatever reasons there are, or is there more of a science to hooking them on the preference?
Hmm. So, gee, that's a great question. I'm gonna have to think about this one. Um, I think marketing is art and science. And I know this seems like a very, very high level answer first, but it is. On one hand, it's it's a lot of experimentation, etc. Yet on the other hand, what's working, what's not, etc. So if we delve into preference, it's the question of how do they actually how do you make them actually prefer you over anybody else? And that speaks directly to how we started today's conversation about sustainable competitive differentiation. Okay. So yes, it's true that, think about you're buying a car. You see all these different ads for cars, and they're all kind of sexy ads, and they give you this feeling that this one's more safe and this one's a little bit more economical, and but they're all basically trying to sort of put lipstick on something to try and convince you to sort of say, oh, I've got to get a Buick or a Mercedes or whatever the advertisement actually is, right? And that might predispose you to a particular car. But to develop true preference, I think you need a little bit more. And that's where you lean into, what is your IP? People don't care about us. They care about how we can solve their problem, right? Think about it. So have you demonstrated your ability to solve a particular prospect's problem, right? And that's kind of where the core, in my view, certainly with service businesses, service and knowledge-based businesses, that's where you've got to lean in with preference. Do you have, for example, content that speaks to the specific problems that they solve? Do you have, for example, examples of other, methodology or technology that might actually do that? Do you expose some of this so they can, get a sense of what you are, what you've been able to do it? Do you have a client list, for example, that says, gee, if they did it for those people and they're a credible organization, maybe they could do it for us, right? Do you have a history? Do you have a brand that sort of speaks to a particular angle? Probably the best example of this is Apple. People who are in the Apple ecosystem, they are rabid fans. Their preference is locked down, right? Yeah, and it has to do with how much Apple's invested in their brand over the years. Yeah, of course, their hardware is very good and their software is very good. This is IP, isn't it? Yes, their advertising is pretty clever, but all that does is move people towards exploration of that particular brand. The switching stats in terms of into the platform are crazy. They're really, really good, right? So we need to think about how do we become, say, the Apple, okay, of our particular industry in terms of the specific exposure to what makes us different that's relevant to particular clients. Now, I'll just mention one other thing, Rania. particular clients. So the question of what are the personas that we're actually targeting and which ones are we not? Right. So if we know, for example, that a particular persona, what's important to them is X, well, guess what? The specific preference activities that we actually have on our list need to deal with that X. A different persona, it might be, Y or Z. Those kinds of things are what we need to hook the people in with in terms of preference. Right. So, for example, Volvo knows that they've been pushing the whole we're a safe car. Safety is number one, right? So all of their product has got safety features built in. Their preference advertising is not just Volvo is a fast car. No, it's Volvo is a safe car, and here's the evidence of it, right? Same thing with their experience in the dealers. Like all the conversation has to do with the safety features, not just how many horsepower or how many miles per gallon or whatever sort of thing that might be of interest to a different type of client profile. So
I want to pick up something you said. You said marketing requires experimentation, and this is true for sure. But maybe you could speak to the difference of marketing at like a macro level, like a strategic level versus like the micro level and your A/B testing, So if there's too much experimentation, does this show a lack of like defined business strategy, or is marketing experimentation separate from business strategy?
I think that when you do a lot of the experimentation, it sort of generates a number of weak signals that can feed into that overall strategy, right? So there's merit in that. If you think about some of the interesting, programmatic and AI-based advertising where you put in like 15 or 20 parameters and it pumps out thousands of different ads that then are sort of deployed, and you look at the stats and which ones hit and which ones don't, and you can sort of optimize based on this huge, you know, A, B to the millionth square testing kind of thing. Um, I wouldn't say that's like one ringy dingy, two ringy dingy kind of testing, but that's really the ultimate of where you want to be, using large data to sort of drive a better understanding of a particular market. And as I said, it's not just weak signals when you're doing that kind of thing. That is specific data that can drive and actually set the overall marketing strategy. So yes, at the very top, you'd say, yeah, here's the various personas. Here's the journeys that we want them to go in. Here's the specific touch points. Here's how marketing can have a difference and an impact at those particular different touch points. By the way, how do we get people in at the very beginning? Well, depending on the persona, here's the different stimuli that can actually be used to it. And so all the experimentation is, in my view, just in the project management world, they sort of went from the old waterfall approach to agile. In a certain sense, this is the ultimate agile in the marketing sense versus project management. We rinse and repeat, we learn, we change, we pivot, etc. Now, let me argue the other side, which is your point that says, well, isn't this just a great waste of time? It appears there's no strategy. It's pointless. Okay, well, at the extreme, I guess it would be if there is no strategy. But I think the question is, how do we make sure, okay, that we're not always locked in, but how do we make sure that we're not like higgledy-piggledy wasting resources doing stuff that we have no idea. We have no idea. We should have some idea. We know who the ideal customer profile is. We know, we get a sense of the potential journeys. We hopefully know where which pond these fishes are swimming in, so we could spend our time in those ponds, right? And so yeah, we should experiment in other ponds. We should change our fishing lines to use the analogy, etc. But at the very end of the day, you fish where the fish are.
I want to talk to you about, we talk to our clients about evergreen content, versus, up to the minute, commentating. For your own personal style, you do not use, the news commentator approach. You like the evergreen approach, and there's definitely tremendous merit in that. But you've also shared, there are people who offer commentary on other people's material, including, criticizing it, lots of op-eds kind of thing. You have said you don't want to get into sort of public or private spats with anybody. You certainly don't want anybody coming after you or getting any bad press as a result of it. We see public spats all the time, and it just is like fantastic marketing, fantastic advertising and eyeballs. It just seems to bring attention to the people.
But so I don't have a problem with contrarian views. I've certainly taken that a lot. Okay, but the idea of saying somebody else is wrong, okay, in a public forum, okay, for me that just doesn't sit right. And you could do this in a very kind way. People do, okay. But the question sometimes I have, when I read something or watch something and it's something I disagree with, I try and for me anyway, I try and get behind and say, why are they saying that? What is it in their experience that led them to that particular conclusion? Gee, what are they trying to accomplish by saying what it is? Sometimes it's a question of somebody's advocacy that I don't agree with, but they're being paid to lobby for a particular organization, right? So does it make sense for me personally to sort of get involved in that? I would, if I strongly disagree with it, I'd probably reach out to that person and say, oh, I'd like to understand. Okay. That being said, there is a role for having the public spat and taking a position and not being sort of mealy-mouthed, if you will, if it's something that speaks to something that's core to your particular organization, or, for example, your industry. And I do think there's a role for that. With respect to, the idea of gee, is it evergreen content or is it time-bound content? There's a number of blogs that I follow, for example, that I only follow because everything is time-bound, right? And it's up to the minute on a particular kind of area. So I've got a bunch of interests that I do like to see up to the minute, whatever it happens to be, right? So there's absolutely a role for that. Okay, there's absolutely a role for that too. I think though the question is, what does your particular audience expect, right? And what's your goal for that content, if there is? For many organizations that I've been connected with over the years, there's only so much time and resource that's available for say content generation. So the content often has to serve multiple purposes. And so, one the purpose might be that blog. Another purpose might be creating a video based on it. Another purpose might be developing a white paper out of it, or putting a whole bunch of them together and making a book out of them, or whatever. So killing multiple birds with one effort sort of trumps the idea of saying, let's invest in up to the moment kind of thing. Of course, you can do a bit of both and everything, but if you're suddenly changing what you're doing, it also, may change the profile that you have with your particular audience. You lose audience members, you gain different audience members. So it speaks to what's the role of it, what's the strategy.
Let's channel Randall as coach. Randall, you're famed for saying, all the leaders you work with are very sharp, and sometimes they get stuck. And if they only knew the right questions, they could come up with the right answers. So talk to me about what those prompts should be for when someone's rethinking their marketing. Is there where would you start? On that note, we'll pause here for part 2 of Marketing and Competitive Advantage. We'll pick up with part 3 with more. And if anything we've talked about so far resonate with you, we do reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at randallcraig.net/30. See you back for part 3.